Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and one of the reasons why we are a failed state is we have failed to make democracy work. Government of the people, for the people, by the people. The ancient Greeks were right. If democracy is to work, then the people must be well informed, educated, knowledgeable, diligent, and above all, diligent in holding those in positions of power and authority to account. When the people are ignorant, naive, and gullible, they believe anything, everything they're told, you have a serious problem. Democracy will never work. Here is somebody giving their opinion on how people of Zimbabwe should treat their leaders.
Ndopaunoona kuti kuZimbabwe tine problem one. Ndakatombotaura pane rimwe group, I think one of the guy ari panapa anoziva ndakazvitaura. Ndichitaura about mufesi uyu anonzi Blessed uyu. Ndikati chichazongoitika ari kungofollowa the same footstep yana Ivhani Mawawire, ana Hopewewo, ana Jobscar. Because hauwane support kana Geza auya akanzi nhasi asungwa. Haufa wakawana support from Zimbabwe people, including us. Isusu, WhatsApp warrior, TikTok warrior, you name it. Because these guys kana wasungwa, even vanhu vari paground, havakwanisi kuenda unowa support. Unosafa, unofira dhongi rakaora, unofira mahara. Situation yekuZimbabwe, ukada kumira nhasi chaiko kuda kumira uchibatsirwa noZimbabwe, unokwara wega. Because we are cowards, all of us. Hakuna anokusupport. Even akanzi Bewanyi mwachisa 6 months zvakambirwa Jobscar, mhuri yake yakutosafa, mukadzi wake akutosafa, bonde acharioni. But isusu tinozvikangama zvese izvo. Saka ini chinozondibva nechekuti unoona munhu achishoropodza Chamisa kuti he's a coward, anotya. Ko iwewe uri kuitei? Because iwe kana uchiti unozvigona, pfeka t-shirt akanzi pamberi naChamisa kana kuti idi uri imbwa wenda Zimbabwe. Toona ichi chinoitika. Because haufaniri kushora munhu, especially this guy who's Blessed. Wati zvaaita izvi washoma unozviita izvi. Kunyanya vanhu vari kunoku isusu tiri kuswera tichirova madhodhi kunoku. Very few. Kana vanotsvaka pasocial media vachicampaign about Zimbabwe, there are very few people vanokwanisa kuenda Zimbabwe. Very, very few people vanokwanisa kunoita zvakaita nemufesi uyu. Hakuna. That's why I respect vanhu vakamira papicture yarapo. Ananga ari Vhume, anati those guys, they've been through a lot. But hauwane support from Zimbabwe people. I remember when Geza.
We can stop it there. The point here is the failure of Zimbabweans to appreciate what democracy is all about. He is praising the opposition leaders and denigrating those who have criticized them, who have dared to criticize them. In my view, it's not so much the criticism, it's holding them to account. The opposition were elected by the people of Zimbabwe for a very specific purpose: to implement the democratic reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Tendai Biti, Nelson Chamisa, and all these MDC, CCC leaders have been on the political stage for the last 25 years, including the 5 years of the GNU of 2008 to 2013, when they had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. Any rational person would be supporting or be demanding an explanation from these leaders. Why have you failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU? And yet you will have people like him going on social media, wittering about, oh, you should, if you think you can do better than Chamisa, you should go to Zimbabwe wearing a T-shirt denouncing Mnangagwa. Just unbelievable. Chamisa, Tendai Biti were elected into public office for a specific purpose. Why should the people not hold them to account? And those who dare hold them to account are immediately called cowards. The sheer stupidity of the whole argument beggars belief. We can go back to Zanu PF itself. No one can deny that those who fought in the liberation war endured a lot of hardships. But that should not detract us from holding Mugabe and his cronies to account for the Gukurahundi Massacre, for instance. The primary purpose of the Gukurahundi Massacre was to force the only other political party that posed a serious political challenge to Mugabe, and that was PF SAPO. Gukurahundi was to force them to give up PF SAPO. And the war, that massacre, stopped in 1987 when the late Dr. Joshua Gomo signed the Unity Accord that paved the way for the imposition of the de facto one-party state. That is the reality that we are talking about here. Of course, we should hold Zanu PF, Mugabe and his cronies to account for that massacre, because it negated all the things that people had been fighting for before independence and they've been fighting for since independence. And as long as we remain a dysfunctional dictatorship, many more people will be fighting and dying for fundamental freedoms, human rights, and dignity in Zimbabwe. To say we should not hold Zanu PF leaders to account because of the sacrifice they made, and we, even those of us who were old enough to have been involved in the liberation war, are cowards, is to miss the point completely. Indeed, those who were not involved in the war at all, it is your duty now to make sure that Zimbabwe is a democratic nation, at peace, enjoying prosperity, freedom for all, and hold those Zanu PF thugs to account. That is exactly your duty as a citizen. As much as people agreed with what Blessed Geza and his colleagues said denouncing Mnangagwa and that regime. We should not forget that Geza and these war veterans are the ones who imposed the Zanu PF dictatorship all these years, these last 45 years. In 2017, a group of them protested and denounced the then dictator Robert Mugabe and forced him to resign. And they imposed Mnangagwa. And now another group of war veterans are tired of the current dictator and they've denounced him. What I find disappointing is that all of a sudden, people forget who Blessed Geza and these fellow war veterans are. They forget the history, the role they've played this last 45 years in imposing this Zanu PF dictatorship. Even when you remind them that these guys, if they get Mnangagwa out of office today, they want to impose Chiwenga. Don't have to go through the history to remind people that Chiwenga is a thug. He was the man behind the military coup of 2017, resigned his post in the army to become vice president. The 2018 election and 2023 elections, he was heavily involved. Were those free, fair, and credible? To now pretend that Chiwenga is a Democrat is an outrage. To pretend that Blessed Geza and company are Democrats is idiotic. The people of Zimbabwe should learn from the past. 2017, they took one side in the factional war of Zanu PF. But all they managed to achieve then was swap one dictator for another. How anyone can still view that as a solution beggars belief. And yet here we are. We are so impressed by Geza to the point that he has been elevated to a position of a saint. And people would follow him. They're just waiting for a signal. And they'll pour out in the street the support of his revolution, whose end result we already know is replacing one dictator with another. How anyone can see that as a solution really beggars belief. The people of Zimbabwe need to be smart enough. After 45 years of rigged elections, and the country dragged deeper and deeper into this hell on earth, where Zanu PF has landed us, we really need to sit upright and pay attention. We cannot afford to have another situation where we support a group of people who are only seeking to swap one dictator for another. We should make it very clear what we want is the end of the dictatorship. Swapping one dictator with another does not end the dictatorship. It's only an excuse to perpetuate it. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.